Okay, so we are back at the McLeod CFO conference at the Westin in Nashville, talking about the Blockchain and Transport Alliance and its storied history with Managing Director and FreightWaves CEO Craig Fuller and McLeod VP of Special Projects, Ken Craig. He's also a co-founder of BiTA. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Hey, glad to be here. This is the first time you guys have had me on.
Yeah, right. We normally don't let you see what we do when we record the podcast, but it's awesome to have you here, Craig and Ken.
Yeah, Craig and Ken. I like that. It's a great
so,
name.
As far as I can remember, BiTA started last August?
Mid-August.
Yeah, it was mid-August. So a little bit about BiTA.
Right.
So BiTA is the largest technology alliance in transportation globally. It's the largest organization
on the planet.
On the planet, Earth. So
right.
It's Earth, by the way. So it's the largest organization bringing together companies that are involved in freight transportation to discuss technology concepts, frameworks, and issues.
Yeah,
and ultimately standards.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's all about developing data standards and formats for the implementation of blockchain technology across the supply chain.
Yeah, so the rally point has been blockchain. We think BiTA's role is certainly leading with blockchain. Blockchain's a fundamental view of the market. But there are opportunities beyond blockchain that BiTA will be involved in as technology evolves. So we're certainly focused on blockchain, but it is more broad than that.
Yeah, we've got so many members from all across the supply chain. It's just crazy to not be able to take advantage of that for anything.
Like technology companies like Google, banks like Triumph, all the Class 1 railroads, tons of trucking carriers, blockchain startups, brokerages, and obviously software companies like McLeod. So tell us a little bit about how you guys came together. Like, how did you see the need for this? This was a little bit before Bitcoin's historic bull run, and so it's like, how was blockchain on your radar, and how did this thing get started? Yeah,
I mean, JP, as you point out, in many ways, BiTA looks a lot like the S&P 500, just more broad than just the S&P 500. You have the largest names in transportation, whether we're talking trucking companies, railroads, airlines, et cetera, involved with companies that are in the banking sector, insurance, and so forth. And so really BiTA is an organization that has gotten scale because it represents a need that has not previously been addressed in the market, which is the idea of companies coming together to talk and develop standards, but also look at how technology will impact their business and to discuss how they can implement it. So,
well, let me start a little bit on the history because we were researching blockchain for our user conference, and I could not find any information about the supply chain or trucking in particular. It was all about cryptocurrency.
Finance,
somebody mentioned Craig Fuller. I said, and they sent him an introduction. So I called him and. We just hit it off, and everything I brought up, he was all over it. I mean, I said, I've got a strong background in software industry and everything, but this will never deliver to the industry without standards and things. And Craig said, oh, yes, I've been thinking about that all over the place, and thinking about starting up an alliance, to do that, and I said, you got to do it, man.
I'm glad that you emphasized the importance of standards, because I think it was one of our early conversations, Ken, where you were talking about the medical industry and how Congress sort of mandated the creation of electronic medical records, but didn't create a standard.
Exactly.
And now there are, literally hundreds of formats and vendors.
There's over 200 different EMR
and
companies.
Anyone who's ever needed medical care or changed doctors or gotten billed for something knows that it's a complete disaster.
Right. In Europe, you can go to Italy one day and visit a doctor, and if you end up in Spain a week later, they'll have the same records, same information there. It's a very seamless environment, and in the trucking industry where you have some semblance of standards, like with EDI, it's spaghetti.
Semblance.
It works, but with a lot of pain and suffering. And so we were just talking about all that, and Craig says, "Well, I've got, I think,
So y'all are essentially trying to get it on the front end and solve the problems before they actually compile, before it gets too deep in the blockchain, essentially with standards, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's just two guys that happen to share the same vision that without standards in
I
place,
think
this will never deliver what it promises.
For sure.
I think Ken came. So my name got referenced. It was actually Mo from
Mo Paredes.
from P&S Trucking, who's the CTO. Actually has been a follower of FreightWaves from the very early days. And FreightWaves was one of the publications that was writing a lot about blockchain and specifically about technology. And because of that, that's how I think Mo came across our awareness of blockchain and ultimately how he put Ken and I together.
So can you talk a little bit about who were the initial 7 companies that first sort of formed BiTA? What did you think the scope of the what did you think of the scope of the organization was going to be, and what did it turn out to be?
Well, so I'll take the story. So Ken calls me up and says, "Hey, I hear you know something about blockchain. Can you explain trucking and blockchain and translate these things?" And so I botched my way through it for about 30 minutes.
No. He started describing this thing, and I had a copy of this chart that showed potential use cases, and I'm reading it to him, and he said, "Oh, I did that chart." And that was
He found it on FreightWaves. So Ken and I were talking on this call, and at the end of it, I had mentioned the thought of creating a standards organization to bring together companies. And most of the times when I have an idea and I tell somebody, they're like, "Oh, that's cool," and nobody ever follows up.
Right.
Ken's different. He saw an idea and sent me an email. "We want to be a part of your blockchain and trucking alliance. We'd love to join." And
that email is now part of the immutable ledger.
It is the immutable record.
That'll be in the BiTA Museum.
So it was the next day, actually, and so I called Ben Murphy, who works on our team, and I'm like, "Oh, we got to create an alliance because McLeod wants to announce this next week." And so we did. I went and bought BiTA.studio.
That's right. Special projects gets ahead of marketing.
That's it. Well, he was going to do this press release, and we were going to miss out on an opportunity. So we did that.
I sent him a fake press release just for fun.
He did.
Nice.
Here's the logo, and here's the information. So over the course of that, about 24 hours, I had to go create an alliance. So I just called my friends, people that I knew in trucking, and said, "Hey, we're creating this alliance. Would you like to be a founding member?" I described it a little bit, and we had 7 companies that agreed to come on board, and that created the foundational side of BiTA. And then McLeod did its public press release, and all of a sudden,
it hit the fan.
People started
in a good
coming.
way.
Yeah, in a good way.
And, some other companies that are also in technology reached out and said, "Hey, why are we not founders and charter members?"
I think I know who you're talking about.
No.
And so because of that, it just created this cadence of people were a part of it. And I think what really changed it were a couple of different companies joined that really changed the trajectory of the platform, and probably most credit should go to UPS. UPS was the first big name that was globally known and recognized, that had put their name on something substantial. And so UPS has, we have a relationship with UPS, being a part of an accelerator out of Atlanta that gave us the opportunity to pitch their executives. We talked about BiTA, and they loved it so much that they decided to get behind it. And that's how UPS got involved.
And then FedEx.
And then that day, FedEx joined. And once you have the two of the most important transportation companies in the world to be members of something, a fledgling organization like BiTA at the time, it really took off. And from then, it's just been
I'll say that when we first did this, we thought by the end of the year there might be 25 thought leaders in the thing. And
Right.
it just exploded. And I remember we would be emailing back and forth each day. Craig would say, "It's up to 40. We've got 40." And then it's like, "We've got 70, and it's 85." And
I think
when we broke
40.
100, it was like, "What is going on?"
Well, it was kind of insane, and I feel bad for the people who came to our first meeting because the thing we said is, "Hey, if you join, you'll get to go to the round table. We talk about the initial standards."
Right.
In
Quite
Atlanta.
a large round table.
Well, we thought there would be 30. The original room we had reserved was 30 could hold 30 people.
Oh, yeah, that meeting
And we got up to 152.
Oh dear.
In the very first
was
time. So
packed, and
it
we
was
had to
packed.
turn
We were like, we don't
people
even know what
away.
we're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of nuts. And so that was the foundation of BiTA. And BiTA is about 425 members today, adding about 10 to 20 a week. And then BiTA has
There's
expanded
over
into
2,300 applications right now.
yeah, it was 2,700.
2,700.
Right, so
Okay,
just the
wow.
process of going through all of that,
I'm sorry, that
calling
was
people.
my number was at least a week old. So.
Yeah, I think what BiTA's all about. Forget blockchain for a second, because it doesn't. Whatever the technology is that we're talking about does not matter. I think what BiTA represents is this idea that companies inside of transportation are faced with so many issues that technology and data can potentially solve for.
Right.
And BiTA is right at the right place with the right members to help affect that, and that is what has created an opportunity to come together.
Yeah, my perception is that the only reason we have this many applicants and everything is the FOMO effect. It's the fear of missing out, and that's been driven by the cryptocurrencies.
Right.
And so that's the bad news. The good news is we have over 2,700 applicants, and what that means is when we get the standards in place, my goodness, we got 2,700 members.
Right.
That'll
People
just,
who are
it'll
compliant.
there's a good chance this thing might actually succeed and work. And my goodness, if it can deliver to the supply chain what blockchain has been promising, I mean, that's $1 trillion worth
Right.
of
all of those quite
effect right
fanciful
there.
ROI numbers we see in white papers all the time might actually become a reality.
So the FOMO effect is actually really
probably a good
having
thing,
a good effect for.
I think
blockchain.
I think the initial stages FOMO was everything. I think people saw this blockchain thing.
Better
taking
get
off,
on that.
And my biggest competitor is a part of it, so I got to be in it. And
Exactly.
the guy down the street that I used to work with is in it. I got to join. And certainly, it would be disingenuous to pretend that was not the early stages of it. But what's happened is no one can discount the companies that are around the table and the level of seniority that the people that are involved are actually engaged.
Right.
And I think because of that, it doesn't matter whether or not we ever absolutely get to a full blockchain and implementation on every issue. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it matters whether or not companies that actively compete with one another are talking about how do they solve problems that everyone faces. And I give you a prime example that I think will resonate is UPS and FedEx are not only members of the organization, but they're also on the board. These are companies that, if anyone could be defined as an arch rival in transportation, it's UPS and FedEx.
They're locked in a battle of
But
They're
they are working
they're
together.
hugging each other, singing "Kumbaya."
But they're working together to solve issues because they both have issues to solve. We were on an interview early on with a third-party publication, a mass media publication. UPS was on there, and the journalist asked me about competition, he was putting it in the framework of UPS versus FedEx. And I said, at the end of the day, it's not brown versus purple. That's not what we're talking about. It's about brown and purple against people that are not adhering with transparency and are trying to benefit from a lack of transparency. And so because of that, I think it's a very powerful opportunity.
Yeah, I think like bringing those companies together and having them work to solve common problems is so interesting. I mean, just the dynamics that sort of govern this alliance are so cool because I think everyone, like you said, has a little bit of FOMO, right? They're very aware of the risk of underinvesting in technology, of missing out. There's also a risk, especially with something like blockchain that's nascent and kind of unproven, of overinvesting, of being on the bleeding edge where you're dumping tons of money into something that never becomes commercially viable. And collaborating in this alliance allows companies to manage both of those risks by all sort of like moving together and staying in constant touch with each other.
Well, John Paul, you point out something that I think is integral to what we're talking about. So blockchain is not that useful if you own everything. So if you're the one that owns all the nodes in the ledger and you control it, blockchain is a worthless technology. It's actually a very inefficient technology, and it's misleading to say that you're using blockchain for those matters. And there have been companies that are representing their organic technology that is exactly that, which is it's not distributed. They control all the nodes, they control all the data, and that is a misuse of the principle of blockchain.
Right.
It's a
But
misuse of technology.
that's where the disingenuous marketing comes in. You know, every time you have a new technology, there's people that try to,
Right.
you know, exploit the hype. And
Long Island iced tea,
that's, you know,
Long
like
Island
you can, you know,
blockchain.
I saw a webinar advertised the other day. You can be up on blockchain in 30 days with your business, and I thought, why?
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
who are you going to interact with?
It
Yeah,
doesn't.
there's
It
no
doesn't.
network
And it
for
doesn't
it.
make sense. And so I think that's the important thing. And I want to say this. I'll tell you what BiTA is not. So we've talked about what it is. We'll talk about what it's not. BiTA is not an advocacy organization for
Yes.
legal and regulatory compliance elements. It's not an advocacy organization for any particular political bent. It is a technology-centric organization that is trying to help companies solve commercial outcomes of sharing data. That's all it is. And it is not meant to replace the traditional associations which mark the successful part of our industry.
Right. It's not like it doesn't have a lobbying arm, for example.
There's no lobbying
not
arm.
at
It's
all.
not meant to replace the ATA or OIDA. And, you know, our members have disparate views. Our own journalists at FreightWaves have our own disparate views.
Right.
And you get companies together with their own views are going to be different. And because of that, BiTA's role is simply to bring together companies to talk about technology and come up with standards. And I think that's what makes us really special, is its role is really defined as that.
When you don't, you know, when you look at the all the hype generated by the cryptocurrencies and the FOMO effect there, like, oh man, if I'd brought blockchain in 2010, you know, when it was $1, you know, I wouldn't be working now, you know, that kind of thing. You don't want to miss out on this, and you know, that's exploiting. But you're in an industry where there's not even a standard definition of what a blockchain is,
Right.
and that just opens the door for this. So having an organization like BiTA, the comment I get from a lot of the members is that we're just so thankful there's somebody out here addressing these things so that we don't spin off into you know, just everybody doing their own thing. And that's exactly right. We can, by developing the standards, it will help to
Do you think this is going to, like, because you keep saying that it's actually going to speak to a broader market, like, mentality, like everybody's kind of in the same space. Do you think that's going to propel it into other areas potentially?
Well, I think so. Look, I think at its very core, blockchain is about sharing data. Supply chains are data. I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, supply chains are movement of goods and managing data. And so supply chains are the natural place to rally around a data technology that requires integration. And so that's not concentrated. The other thing about supply chains is, unlike payments and banking, banking and payments are very concentrated instruments, right? In supply chains, it's very different because you have people coming from all different levels of,
multiple levels
of product generation and systems and stuff.
and
so-
technology maturity. They're all over the map, and,
Right.
And global.
traditionally, you know, except for the major leaders, they're still way behind the curve. But you take somebody like Maersk, you know, look at what they're discovering using blockchain with their mountains of paperwork disappearing.
So on that point, supply chain is the perfect place to actually create the framework. And the reason transport is very important is because transport is the liquidity inside supply chains. It's the movement of goods throughout the supply chain. And transportation companies are the ones that are touching multiple members of the supply chain.
Right.
And that is why it is the right place to rally around these concepts. And to your point, Zach, if we can be successful creating successful applications and standards inside of transport and in supply chains, that will reverberate through the rest of the economy.
Well said.
So you spoke a little bit about, you know, the sort of oversubscribed first meeting of BiTA in late 2017. What's happened since then? How many meetings have there been? Can you tell us a little bit about like what the organization is working on now? Like,
Yeah, it's a great-
how are the members getting together?
It's a great question. So, you know, one of the things about BiTA that you have to remember is that these standards are going to be fought over years. This is not a short-term thing, and I think there is a tendency for people to want it now, but that's disingenuous to begin with.
Yeah,
because
that's what I get. I get calls just about every week from a CEO or CIO somewhere saying, "Hey, you know, how do I get on this blockchain?" You know, thing. And so it's hard to say, "Yes, hurry up! It's exciting, it's interesting," but
Then say,
it's not
"Now
going to
slow
happen
down."
immediately. It's going to take some time, and you know, even some of the board members are like, "Hey, we need to get these standards out." And I said, "Why?" They've got to be able to interoperate with financial blockchains and
Right.
Sure.
Other blockchains that aren't there yet. I mean, it's got to all work together. We got to get the interoperability. The carriers are critical to this. When Walmart comes out and says, "Here's our blockchain," we've got to have interacted with them, or else we'll have. If we've issued standards, they're going to fall immediately. So we've got to take time and get this right, and that's the opportunity that we have.
Yeah, I think to go out and just blast something, which is, there are people that want that. There are members of the organization that are expecting that when they go to the meeting, I have a standard, and I think that's incorrect. I think what ultimately at this stage, BiTA's, what we could do to be successful is to bring companies together that have disparate concepts and ideas to start talking about rallying around a couple concepts and creating some commercial outcomes.
Yeah.
Most of those commercial outcomes will be unsuccessful, and that is actually exactly what you want. You want to have a lot of trial and error. You want to have things not work out so that when you do have something work out, you can rally around that concept, and that's what will create your standards. And I think that's the important thing to remember is this is not false short term, and I people that think it's short term are missing the point of what BiTA is about. FedEx and UPS and JB Hunt, and
I don't know if you remember that last slide I presented at the first session, but it was a businessman tied himself to the mast of a boat. I said, you've got to tie yourself to the mast. Don't go off and be doing your own thing. We all need to work together, and it'll take some time to make this happen. But if we get seduced by the hype and the siren song and the disingenuous marketing and all that kind of stuff, it can unravel. But we've got a great team, great group.
So back to your question, JP. Right now BiTA has 2 annual meetings in person. There's at least one webinar a month. There's a weekly newsletter, and then there are
Slack channel.
There's a Slack channel. There's both think tanks and task force, and so so think tanks are basically non-standard bearing. They're set by the members themselves inside the community to say, we want to solve driver detention, or
really exploring use cases.
We have so you have 3 fracking sand trucking companies that fracking sands is very small, that are dealing with a different issue than what the package carriers are, the truckload guys are. They're dealing with the small issue.
The universal driver passport is different from proving temperature control.
Exactly. So these are, you start getting these nuances, and that's why it's so complicated. What BiTA is doing is encouraging those companies to start thinking through ideas and concepts and rallying around concepts to come up with ideas to hopefully create commercial outcomes, and then marrying technology companies that can solve for those issues. So that's the first thing on the think tank side.
We'd like to have, we're not going to standardize the use cases, but we'd like to have information on those for the BiTA members that call and say, well, is there a good use case for doing this? That's another thing you got to be careful of. Is I call it the Oprah blockchain. Like you get a blockchain, you get a blockchain. That everybody needs to. It's the technological hipsters. Blockchain will solve that. Right. And so you have to be careful. So the work we do on use cases will not be standardized, but it'll be informative and useful to.
Well, it's so exciting. I mean, it's so exciting. Like, I can't wait for UPS and FedEx to issue a white paper together. Like, imagine how
Don't
compelling.
hold your breath.
But I'm saying, like, I know that we're working on, like, these groups are working on them now. So I mean, I just think that's going to be really compelling. It'll be, I think, universally interesting to people. Whether you're in BiTA or not. I mean,
well, there's a great spirit of cooperation right now.
That's one thing I want to say about BiTA is that there have been technology companies that have tried to instill their will on BiTA. In other words, have said, we want everything to be, if there's a standard, we want to create patents and create royalty flow off of that. Not BiTA, but organizations that have tried to come into BiTA have said that. That actually conflicts with the interest of BiTA. So the board laid out very early in the cycle, it said, any standard that is created among BiTA, by BiTA organization, will be public and non-royalty bearing, which means nobody actually generates income when someone uses the standard. That's a very powerful outcome that could have gone the other way. And I know you fought it, Candace fought it, I fought it.
It's so cool. It's like, it's like BiTA is like transportation's first like open source developer community.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I said,
I'm gonna add that to the website.
I'll never live down standing up on the table in the boardroom, jumping up and down saying that. So.
Yeah. Ken did fight it aggressively. I supported Ken. A couple of other key board members supported Ken and broadly. And there are some big companies with lots of money that tried to influence the outcome in that decision, and they have not won that battle.
I think it's really important just to, sort of the credibility of the organization and ultimately, its value proposition.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, anything else from the history of BiTA? What maybe we should talk about what we're trying to get done in the next year.
So I think BiTA's, again, trying to create commercial outcomes.
Okay.
So identify those issues that everybody faces, trying to marry up companies that share the same issue, that have the same challenges, but on different companies, and looking for technology vendors that can potentially solve for those. Keep in mind, these are non-standard activities today.
Right.
Over time, you'll start to see standards rallied again, and it's going to be a multi-year approach, not short-term.
And we do have an organization that's working with us. It's a standards development specialty company, and so they're giving us guidance and things. And we have 3 different committees right now that have been formed, technical committees, one for finance and payments, and one for interoperability, that are forming now and establishing the members to actually, research and develop the standards in each of those areas. In addition to the study groups that he talked about.
The think tanks.
Awesome. Well, Ken Craig from McLeod and Craig Fuller from BiTA and FreightWaves, thanks so much for stopping by and joining us on What the Truck this week.
Well, I think we'd be remiss if we did not mention MarketWaves coming up in November.
Okay,
So that's November 12th and 13th.
Plug it.
So November 12th and 13th, the BiTA meeting will be on the 14th of November, and it's bringing together...
It's at the Texan Gaylord Convention Center and Resort
which is in Grapevine, Texas, just 5 minutes from Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport.
Well, let me say the Transparency 18 thing was a huge success, and people that were there for the first one couldn't believe that these guys a year ago weren't even in business. I mean, it's very polished.
We just went through the agenda today for MarketWaves, and it's going to... Everything's bigger in Texas, so I'm excited about it.
But I mean, we had over 1,000 people in attendance, and I don't know how many were live streaming it. It was just awesome.
We had over 1,000 live
and we'll have a
streams.
BiTA meeting at that session.
I cannot wait. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of What the Truck at the McLeod CFO Conference in Nashville. Make sure you subscribe to What the Truck on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify, and rate and review us so that more listeners can find the show. Well, that'll do it for today, and we'll catch you next time on What the Truck.